Welcome back to the Uneducated Philosopher. It's Saturday, July 26th. Um, Today I'd like to talk about an article in the New York Times yesterday that kind of caught my eye. Uh, Something that I kind of been paying close attention to for quite a while now. Um, Basically, a few years back, I read about some studies that they did in Berkeley of years ago. They did some studies that was called the broken window theory, and basically how it was is that if you have an area, a building, and there's a window, and there's a hole in the window, so there's a broken window, and you leave it, eventually what comes along is graffiti, then eventually what comes along is trash, and eventually what comes along is crime, etc. So the broken window theory was basically, if you fix the broken window and leave it clean, then the other things don't happen. So nothing is too minor to fix. And they did these tests over and over again, and what they would do is they would have areas that were clean, and they would put bike racks, and then they would have bikes all in there that were unlocked, and then just right close they would have an area that there was bikes in the racks, but there would be some graffiti on the wall, or a hole in the window, garbage around. And they would notice that a lot of groups of people would hang out in the graffiti area, take the bikes there, etc., and the clean area was untouched all the time. So after a while they started to get pretty conclusive evidence, and that's when they formed this broken window theory. Now, I learned this in recovery because I remember reading, when I was in recovery, I was reading about how if you keep your living space organized, it helps keep your life organized, which helps keep negative thoughts out of your head, which helps keep addictive thoughts out of your head. So basically the principle is, if you keep everything organized, starting with your living space, you limit the chances of having addictive thoughts. And I always thought that that was a pretty amazing concept, and I will always try to keep strict on that. And I would always notice that from time to time, when I would keep my room and my apartment and stuff like that a bit of a mess, that I would start to get some old behaviors and old thoughts coming back. So for me, I always felt like there was some validity to this broken window theory. Now, I know this information got to Rudy Giuliani when he was mayor of New York. I believe sometime in the early 90s. And I think this was just after he was doing this. I think it was just after, when he was district attorney, and he did this major mob cleanup with the Gambinos and all that, Gotti and all that. And then, I think, and shortly after he became mayor, and he basically talked to the police chief, and they proposed the broken window theory. The street crime in New York was super high, and they were all really violent crimes. So the basic theory was that if we concentrate on the low level, keeping everything clean. Let's clean up New York. It was basically, let's give New York a facelift. Before that, every year, police were asking for more funding and more police. So more manpower, more funding for manpower, etc. And every year the budget was getting bigger and bigger, and they were getting more and more, and yet nothing was happening with the crime. The people were complaining. It was becoming, quite disastrous. Giuliani came with this plan. The police chief accepted it, and they basically started to implement the broken window theory. So they did this facelift to New York City, where they were going to clean up the streets, all the graffiti, the buildings. They were going to fix broken windows, get rid of like the scummy alleys. And they did a remarkable job. But this, I believe, cut police funding to invest in giving New York the facelift. And there was a lot of scrutiny at the time, but it actually worked. Coming up until now, the numbers are significantly lower, a lot lower for violent crimes. But with these recent events in New York, I think it was Long Island. I'm going to read a little bit of this article to you. So basically it says, safer error tests, wisdom of broken windows, focus on minor crime. So this was done by Joseph Goldstein, and I'll just read a little bit of it. It said, even as violent crime has receded across New York City, arrests are near historic highs, driven by an increasingly controversial imperative that no offense is too minor for police officers to pursue. Now the death of a Staten Island man after officers tried to arrest him for peddling cigarettes is intensifying scrutiny of the police department's unflagging push to arrest people over the most minor offenses. The police department reported making 394,539 arrests last year. That is tens of thousands more arrests than in 1995, when there were 3 times as many murders in the city, and the department was in its early embrace of the broken windows strategy, which sees enforcement of low-level offenses as effective at preventing more serious crime. William J. Bratton, the man who brought broken windows policing to New York in the 1990s, is once again the city's police commissioner, appointed by Mayor Bill de Blasio, and is carrying on the department's focus on so-called quality of life crimes that he considers the seeds of more serious disorder. So, I mean, the article goes on, and this was just the front page, and then it goes to a whole nother section in A21. But, basically you get the idea that now that crimes are not there's not as many high violent crimes. They're still sticking to this broken windows theory, and now people are starting to actually test the theory. So now what my question is after almost 20 years, okay, after almost 20 years, is it really the theory itself that is starting to go down, or is it just the way it's being implemented? Because, like, the way I see it, I've related in terms of recovery for myself, and I've believed it to psychologically work. And I think it's a hell of a lot better than just throwing money at a problem. I've always had a problem with that. The issue, people think you can just throw money at issues and it's just going to go away, and it never does. Maybe not never, but very seldom. So, my issue is, okay, yeah, you had these police officers that put this guy in a chokehold and all that, which is brutal, police brutality. But shouldn't we focus more on the police brutality itself, which has always kind of been an issue in New York City? Instead of saying, okay, 20 years later, when a lot of New York got cleaned up and the numbers are better for violent crimes, people do feel a lot safer. Like there was a time where everybody, all the senior citizens were booking to Florida because they were scared shitless to live in New York City. You know? So, I mean, there might be a lot more arrests, but it's for a lot of petty stuff. So what I'm asking is, on an ethical level, is it really the broken window theory that is starting, like, you know, okay, we saw the good effects, and then now after so many years we start to see the long-term effects, which, I mean, this has happened in the past. I mean, you look at Keynesianism and economics. He believed that just throwing lots of stimulus would save an economy, and then in the long run you can see the inflation having its effect on people. But I think this is a little bit different. I think that the broken window theory still works, and that just because crime went down doesn't mean that the officers still have to push so hard on minor crimes. And even if they still believe, yes, okay, we can't let no crime go unturned or unpunished, that doesn't mean they have to handle it so harshly. Like, they can still say, okay, this is the law, this is the bylaw, you broke it, this is the punishment for it. They don't have to beat you up. You know, they don't have to choke you out or taser you or none of that shit. So my main question is, on an ethical level, is it the broken window theory that's the problem here 20 years later? Is it the after effects of that? Or is it more of a level of how the police are just handling things and the way things are being handled? Should they get rid of the broken window theory now that 20 years later high crimes have went down? Should they go back to being a little more lenient on the lesser crimes? And if they do, does that mean things are going to go back to the way it was in the 80s and the early 90s? Because New York in the 80s was crazy. Like, absolutely crazy. Like, just way too crazy. So, I mean, you know, you need to ask yourself, like, is it really the system that was implemented and this is the after effect of it? Or is it simply there's some small little minor tweaking that needs to be made? And I mean, I think this is a very ethical, important question, especially for New York City. But I mean, I think it's also important for people that are just interested in the broken theory in general, the broken window theory. I mean, I've used it myself for recovery, so I ask myself, okay, well, if this is the long-term effects of it, will it also have long-term effects when I apply it to my recovery? You see? So basically, that's just what I would like to know, and if anybody would like to respond to that, or you know, you could catch me at on my webpage, or on Facebook, social media. And you could also catch me at Robbie at un-educatedphilosopher.com. And I would love to hear what people's insights are on that. I'd love to hear on whether they believe that the broken window theory works, whether they believe that it worked and now we should just move on and try something else, or if they should just keep implementing that broken window theory but do some minor tweaking. I'd be really interested to hear what people have to say about that. So that's my topic for the day, and thank you very much. Cheers.